All right, so we're still in the midst of the Greek period, but we need to pause and take a look at Antiochus Epiphanes because he's super important for what follows. So again, we said in the last video that Antiochus IV, or Antiochus Epiphanes, becomes one of the greatest threats Israel has ever known. So what happened was, after he got out of Roman prison and he came back and he followed his father and became king of the Seleucids, the empire was weak, and so he sought to secure and unify the kingdom through strict Hellenization. And so he would call himself Epiphanes, which meant God revealed, but the people called him Epiphanes, meaning madman, because Antiochus Epiphanes was intense and he was very crazy, but he was powerful and he was a threat. So even though the Seleucid kingdom, they finally have the victory over the Ptolemies that they have been fighting for decades to try and accomplish, the empire was nearly broke, and they were threatened terribly by the growing threat that was the Roman Empire. So in order to try and unify and strengthen his kingdom, Antiochus robs temples for their treasures in order to sell them and to earn revenue for his fractured and weak empire. He also increased taxation on the people. Another thing he did was that he sold the office of the high priest, which was the most sacred office in Judaism, to the highest bidder. And this, of course, heavily angered the Jews. He also, through trying to strictly Hellenize Jerusalem, he tried to turn Jerusalem into a Greek city, including all kinds of things, like Olympic Games. He tried to force Jewish youth to become Greek. So Alexander the Great's Hellenization was much lighter. It was more affirming, whereas Antiochus's Hellenization was much more assimilation. He was trying to rid the world of Judaism and force Jerusalem to become a Greek center. And what happens next is that after he stopped in Rome, he goes down. Remember, Alexandria is the center of the Ptolemaic Empire. Now that Antiochus IV is in charge, he tries to overtake Alexandria, which is now not really being controlled by the Ptolemies as much as it's being controlled by Rome. But he goes down there to try and overtake it, and he is stopped. He stopped shamefully, and what happens is he is forced to retreat back up through Jerusalem, through Israel, and he vents his anger on Jerusalem. And what I want to do is I want to read to you a quote that comes from the Zondervan International Bible Backgrounds Commentary, because this just says it. It just says it so well. So here's what happens. Antiochus was determined to make sure that Palestine was loyal to himself in order to act as a buffer state between himself and the Romans. Considering himself Zeus Epiphanes, he ordered a cultic Hellenization policy in Palestine. Antiochus sent his soldier Apollonius with 22,000 soldiers who came under the pretense of peace, and they attacked Jerusalem on the Sabbath, knowing that Orthodox Jews would not fight, and he killed many people. Women and children were taken as slaves. The city was plundered and burned. Shortly afterward, in 167, Antiochus determined to exterminate the Jewish religion by forbidding the people to live in accordance with their ancestral laws. He forbade the observance of the Sabbath, customary festivals, traditional sacrifices, and the circumcision of children, and he ordered that the copies of the Torah must be destroyed. Idolatrous altars were set up, and the Jews were commanded to offer unclean sacrifices and to eat swine's flesh. Anyone who disobeyed any of these orders was sentenced to death. The climactic, infamous deed, though, was on December 16th, or Kislev, as they would call it, 16th, 167, when the temple in Jerusalem, as well as the Samaritan temple at Mount Gerizim, became the place of worship for the Olympian Zeus, offering swine's flesh on the altar of Zeus, which was erected on the altar of a burnt offering. All of this, though, was a big mistake on Antiochus's part. He wanted to consolidate his empire around the Hellenic culture and religion, thinking that the Jewish religious eccentricities were loyal to the Ptolemaic dynasty. He never realized the significance of the Jewish religion, and his actions sparked the Maccabean Revolution. It's a long quote, but it says it perfectly what he did and what happened as a result. And here's a famous painting about this event. This is what's known as the Abomination of Desolation, what Antiochus did to eradicate, to demoralize, and to destroy Judaism. But what he did instead was he caused one of the greatest Jewish revolutions in history. And that's what we're going to look at in our next video. So next, we're going to look at the Maccabees and the period of Jewish independence.